Hi everybody, welcome to Simply Scuba and welcome to Ask Mark. I told you I'd be back. It was just an April Fool things last time. It just so happens that April the 1st was on a Friday. But yep, this is where I answer all of your scuba diving questions, queries, and respond to any corrections that you have. If you have any questions that you'd like me to elaborate on, pop it down in the comments below, and if you use the hashtag AskMark, it just stands out, so it's a lot easier for me to find. So this week we are talking about Defog solutions, Sidemount versus twins, exposure protection, titanium and oxygen, Drysuit bags, and floaty fins. So let's dive straight in with the first question. Derek Walter and Ivan Ibarra had very similar questions. They asked a DIY defog solution recipe. So I think I must have, when we were looking inside one of my dive bags, I showed my my defog solution in a little container. So that's probably where that comes from. And yeah, so I make my own. There are plenty of commercial defog sprays out there that do perfectly fine, but personally I use Johnson & Johnson, No More Tears, because obviously, and the ratio that I use, I don't use an exact ratio. I try and use as little baby shampoo as possible, so it's probably like 1 to 9. I put a bit of baby shampoo in the bottle of a squeezy bottle. I've got a few different ones. Do I have one in here still? Yeah. So that's one of my older ones that I don't use anymore because it started to leak. So yeah, I just put like about 1/10 of baby shampoo in there, and then fill the rest with just water. Give it a good shake up so it's sort of mixed up, and that's it. And then just give it a little sort of squirt before the dive, and you're good to go. The shampoo, if you use too much, then it does get a bit too soapy, and that's really annoying. I tried it neat, just with like 2 drops of baby shampoo, kind of scrub it on the inside, give it a wash, and then go diving, and that was quite annoying. So then I decided just to stick to sort of a diluted mixture, and touch wood, it works perfectly fine. There might be more effective ratios out there, but for me personally, like 1 to 9, yeah, it does the job, because all it's doing is just changing the surface tension of the water, and you don't need too much of that solution to actually do it. So yeah, just find yourself, I've got a different bottle nowadays which is a bit more precision applicator. I think a lot of divers also use spray applicators. They're quite good. I just haven't got around to investing in one. And then yeah, just sort of make your own solution up. It's a lot cheaper because you can buy those big bottles from the superstore, and yeah, you're only using a little at a time, and then you can use it for other things like washing your wetsuit, washing your children's hair, and what it's actually supposed for, and your own hair, I suppose, if you really wanted to. But yeah, as for defog, yeah, that's what I use personally. A ratio of like 1 to 9 probably, maybe a touch over, but yeah, that's all I really use. Ludden asks, from what I've seen, people in colder waters, Europe, tend to go towards a twin setup, whilst in warmer waters, Southeast Asia, Mexico, etc., side mount is much more common setup. Is there a logical reason for this related to climate? Yeah, I think it mainly comes down to the gloves that you're using. Because I've tried side mounts sort of here in the UK in the winter months, and with clunky gloves, it's just a lot of clipping and a lot of kind of stuff, and you're wearing more exposure protection, so all the reaching whatnot is just a little bit more cumbersome, whereas with a twin set, you just strap it on your back and go. There's a lot less like manipulation of cylinders. And I think that's mainly it. I mean, side mount is more for the flexibility and sort of getting in and out of the water and getting through confined spaces. So when you need it in colder waters, you're going to use it. But if you don't need it for a lot of the open water stuff that we do, yeah, you don't need that kind of flexibility. And I think that's mainly the thing. I think you really have sort of hit that nail on the head of the sort of the geolocations of, yeah, where it's pretty cold, they tend to wear twins, and then where it starts to get a bit warmer, it's shifting over to side mount. And yeah, I think it's mainly down to gloves and exposure protection and literally kind of reaching, because I remember the very first time when I was doing a side mount course, I actually had fingertip-less gloves. I just had some 5mm gloves, and I just cut the tips off of them so that I had dexterity. And oh, Struth, it must have been like February or something, and yeah, my fingertips were pretty cold, but I wanted that dexterity to be able to feel for the bolt snaps, because I've never done it before, and with like a clunky 5mm gloves, then yeah. But going forwards, I think now that I dive with dry gloves, I have that dexterity back, and I still have the warmth, but I still just stick to my twin set just because it's really nice and simple. If I needed to sort of have that flexibility, then yeah, I would sort of go with side mount, but I think nowadays it is just easier just to go with simple twin set. They do the job, you throw it on your back and it's good to go. And yeah, in warmer climates, yeah, they kind of like that. I don't really see too much of a point of side mount in just clear blue waters. It is more for overhead environments, but if you suffer from back problems or whatnot, that's really where they're sort of quite useful, because you don't have to carry the weight of the cylinders out of the water, and getting into the water you can clip it off to a line. But yeah, I think it's mainly down to the gloves and the exposure protection that you're wearing. Patrick S asks, hi, thank you so much for taking the time every week to answer these tons of questions. You're more than welcome. I'm currently in the market for new exposure protection. My old 7mm seems to have reduced in size. Must have been made out of the infamous shrinking neoprene. Yeah, mine does the same, especially after Christmas. But I wonder whether it's smart to go again for a 7mm. I think buying a 5mm and an additional Drysuit might be a more versatile set. The lakes and seasides around here in Germany are not known to be the warmest and coziest. The 5mm would be better for traveling and in the summertime, and I take it layering up is still an option. Secondly, since Drysuits costs are not exactly low, any recommendations when looking or buying for a second-hand or used Drysuit as an entry into Drysuit? Yeah, so my current setup, my two sort of primary exposure protections, I have my tri-laminate Drysuit and I have my 2.5mm shorty. Those are my usual go-tos. I do have a 5mm, but it's been a long time since I've took that out. I think the last time I went in, or I took my 5mm, that was in the Red Sea in January. So no, I tend to dive my Drysuits at home here in the UK throughout the year. I just change the exposure protection underneath it, a different undersuit, and whenever I'm diving abroad somewhere so nice and sunny, I'm either in my 2.5mm shorty or just in my rash vest. It's quite rare that I bring my 5mm anymore. It's a little bit redundant. So yeah, I'd invest in a Drysuit because they're very versatile, especially tri-laminates, because a tri-laminate you can dive in the Red Sea. There's no sort of upper limit because it's depending on what you're wearing underneath it. All tri-laminate Drysuit does is keep you dry. It's what's underneath that keeps you warm, gives you that insulation. So yeah, I personally invest in a Drysuit. I go down that route. It just expands your capabilities. And a 5mm, I'd probably buy that second, maybe, unless you're really into your sort of wetsuits and you haven't got your Drysuit cert yet. Then yeah, a 5mm is a good all-rounder, but the Drysuit would be a bit more practical. As far as investing in second-hand ones, yeah, my first ever Drysuit was a second-hand Drysuit. I bought it from the manager of the dive center, and that was a lovely thing. It'd been well looked after. I think the main things to look at are going to be the seals. Make sure they're in good condition and make sure that they fit you. If you haven't worn a Drysuit before, it can be a little bit just hard to know whether oh, is this too tight or is this not tight enough? There's got to be that sweet spot. So yeah, just have a look at the seals, and if you can, try it on when you're trying it on. Just sort of make sure that you can sort of reach the back of your neck and take a knee and all that kind of stuff. Make sure it does fit you nice and properly. And obviously ask why they're getting rid of it. That's usually quite an important one. Have a look on the inside of the valves if you can. Get the Drysuit, look at the inside. If it's caked with like talcum powder or something, that could be a bit annoying. It's worth cleaning that up first. Otherwise, I mean, the first thing that I would do is get it home and leak test it. So I usually put like a drinks bottle in the cuffs, and I have an old bin that goes in the neck seal. Seal it up and inflate it with the dump valve closed, and then spray it down with a mild soapy solution. Look down all of the seams and just kind of all the area, especially the crotch, and if you see any bubbles coming out, it's going to leak from there, so you're going to need to get that patched or fixed. Otherwise, it's rare that you're going to be able to do that before you buy it, but hey, needs must. Those are probably my main things, just sort of make sure that the seals are in good condition. The zipper as well, have a look at the zipper, make sure there are no loose teeth. They're all uniform and in a nice straight line. And that's probably about it. Yeah, just kind of use your sort of common sense just to make sure that it's not falling apart, it's in decent nick, and it definitely fits you. Jonathan Ventresca says, hey Mark, hey Jonathan, my dive shop told me I can't use nitrox with an atomic T3 regulator. I know they make their own nitrox and not a pre-mixed blend. I know titanium can react with oxygen, it definitely can. Does this also apply to titanium in my SSI titanium inflator for my BC2? Thanks. No, I think that's... I mean, depending on the nitrox that you're using, I think T3 is fine for nitrox up to 40%. I think that's even written in the manual. You can double check. Just search for Atomic Aquatics T3 manual. But yeah, you can definitely use nitrox. I think this is there's a lot of like worries and like wives' tales about titanium regulators and oxygen, that they're going to blow up because it happened like once or twice, and a lot of people just think it's just titanium, oxygen, nitrox. No, but I think it's more when it's in concentrations over 40%, just increases your chances, and it shouldn't matter their blending method, because they're not blending it through your regulator. That pure 100% or 99%, 98, whatever they make it, oxygen isn't getting to your titanium first stage, so it's not an issue. By the time it's gotten into the cylinder and mixed up, it's then the nitrox mix, and then it goes through your regulator. I think the main things is that your regulator has to be as clean as possible. If there's like dirt and contaminants and whatnot that get on the inside and you ram that valve open, that enriched air nitrox can sort of create a spark point. As far as I'm aware, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but the last time I checked, that was kind of the case. So just keep your regulators clean. They should be perfectly fine with nitrox up to 40%, which is a pretty high mix anyway. For your inflator, yeah, shouldn't be an issue, because by the time that gas has come from the cylinder through your first stage, through the hose, and then down to the actual titanium parts on the inflator, it's not such a shock to it. So yeah, I mean, the usual thing is just open up the valve nice and slowly so it starts to hiss. I think some divers even hold down the purge button on their inflator, or a purge button on their second stage, the inflator button on the inflator, sorry, whilst they're inflating it until gas comes out, then they release it, then it charges up. So that's less of that kind of shock of enriched air nitrox hitting that point. But no, you shouldn't have a problem with nitrox in a titanium inflator, and you shouldn't have a problem with it in a Atomic T3. I think that's them being a little bit overcautious, unless you are using like real sort of rich mixes of like 80, 90, 100% oxygen. But no, blending method shouldn't be an issue. I think it is just to up to 40%. You're perfectly fine with titanium regulators. It's better to keep them as clean as possible and use certain greases, because some, is it hydrocarbon greases? It reacts as well. So yeah, no, I think you'll be perfectly fine with them. Double check it in the user manual. I'll see if I can find a link to it, and I'll pop it up there if I can. But yeah, I think you'll be fine. Emma H89 says, for the Hydra Drysuit bag, I'm looking at purchasing this to store and carry my dry suit. Is the zip on the bag waterproof so it won't leak? Also, do you think this would fit an Apex KVR dry suit? Thanks. So the Hydra bag, it just comes in one of those clamshells. And I think you can buy it separately. I think I've seen it as a separate item for like 45, 50 quid or something. So there's a few different styles of dry suit bag, but the Hydra is what I call like a clamshell. It's got a zipper all the way around, a bit like a taco, and then you just open it up and then it turns into a changing mat, which is quite useful. The material itself is waterproof, but I don't think the zipper is. I don't think I've ever seen a dry zip on that style of bag. So no, whilst it will keep your feet dry and it will keep stuff from getting through, if you put your wet dry suit inside of it and then zip it up, the water will just seep out of the bottom. I used to have that on my my Oceanic dry suits, sort of one of those. I don't think it was ever that much of an issue. I mean, I just tended to hang up my dry suit, sort of boots at the top, as soon as I got out of it. Then you're like logging dives and signing logbooks and doing all that kind of stuff, getting the rest of the stuff, and then I'd put my dry suit away so it kind of drip dried as much as possible. Would it fit a KVR? Yeah. If it can fit a Hydra, which is a neoprene dry suit, it'll definitely fit a KVR1 dry suit, a laminate. I know it's got like 2 layers, but it won't be as thick as a neoprene dry suit. So yeah, it'll definitely fit inside of that. But yeah, I think it will work. I don't think leaking will be too much of an issue, but yeah, it's not a completely dry sealed zipper on it. Terry Della Cuadra asks, I have been diving about 2 years now. My starter fins are buoyant to the point that if I'm stagnant, I invert. I have a strong kick, would like to be able to observe the environment in a horizontal position. What fins would you recommend? So you've got floaty fins. It's quite rare to have actual fins that are completely positively buoyant. Some of them are slightly positively buoyant, just so that if you drop them, they don't just plunge and you lose them, you meet them back up on the surface. It's more often that either your trim is slightly off. That will be my first port of call, instead of buying more equipment and then realizing that, oh, it's actually my weight distribution. But there are heavier fins out there. Fins like Hollis F1 fins, they're the first ones that come into mind. A lot of the jet style fins like Scuba Pro Jet, they're a bit more negatively buoyant. The Mares, the Power Plana, I think they're neutrally buoyant, because a buddy of mine invested in those, and he was very focused on the buoyancy of them because he's a photographer. He has to keep that sort of perfect sort of buoyancy whilst he's lining up his shot, and I think his fins were a bit too negative, so that was annoying him, and he invested in the Power Plana. My RK3s, in fresh water they float, which means that in salt water they float as well. But yeah, my first port of call, I'm kind of assuming that you're doing this, but I'm going to explain it for us, that anyone else who does have floaty feet, is to shift where my lead is set up. If you've got floaty feet, it usually means it's a little bit too high up. If you've got any lead in your trim weight pouches, which are usually sort of around your mid-chest area or anything up towards your shoulders, I'd move it further down towards the waist, so that your if this is your shoulders and these are your feet, if you've got a lot of weight up here, it's naturally going to push you down. It's not really your feet lifting you up. So I'd shift it down a bit more central around your waist, and that can help. You can also get like a cam band and just attach it to the bottom of your cylinder. I've seen divers do that, just to shift the lead just downwards a bit to adjust your center of buoyancy so it's a bit more horizontal. And of course you can always get ankle weights as well, so just little lead weights. It's either shot lead or those like little ingots that go in just a little ankle bracelet that goes around each of them, and that can help bring them down. They're usually like either half a kilo or 1 kilo. I think you can get different weights on them, so you have anything from 1 kilo to 2 kilos helping to push your feet down. I actually had that in one of my dry suits. That was my first ever dry suit. It had those ingots actually built into it. That was quite a clever design. But if you've done all that and it really is your fins, then yeah, look for like a what you call it, a jet style, vented style fin, because they tend to be made from heavier rubbers. And yeah, just ask around. I'm sure there's a forum somewhere that where people have already worked it out and said, oh no, I use this and they are negatively buoyant. But yeah, the first ones that come to mind are Hollis F1, because they're quite a heavy weighted fin. I used to dive with those. And yeah, a vented style jet fin like Scuba Pro or something. And that's it for today. Thank you for all those questions. Again, good questions today. Sort of oxygen and titanium regulators, that's always an interesting one, and hotly debated online about cleaning your regulators and having to clean your hoses and all that kind of stuff. Whereas as long as you're like doing it clearly, there's obviously a disclaimer in all of the regulator manuals. If you find your regulator manual and you flick through it, there's going to be a section on nitrox use. But yeah, T3s, I think you'll be perfectly fine with them. And yeah, sort of buoyant fins and all that good stuff. Always sort of interesting questions talking about sort of buoyancy and trim. So yeah, if you got any questions, let me know down in the comments below. And if you use the hashtag AskMark, it just makes it a lot easier for me to find it. Thank you so very much for sort of watching and listening, everybody. And of course, safe diving.